you a little bit about ourselves and the company. Let's see here that we can. So who are we? Who are these two guys? What you see here in front of you are the two founders of Lynxeye. Lynxeye was actually founded in the previous millennium. I hope you remember that one. It was the years when you had to memorize phone numbers. It was the years when salad was just lettuce and reading print newspaper every morning was a routine. I know it sounds very long time ago, but that is actually the case. Since then, we have started 2 offices. We have our Stockholm office headquarters, and then I went to Singapore in 2013 and started our office there. So that is almost 8 years ago. Today we are 60 employees in these 2 offices from 10 different countries and most regions in the world that help us find insights about what consumers, what companies are actually striving to achieve with their lives and with their enterprises. If you look at the kind of clients that we have worked with, they are from all kinds of industries and all kinds of regions. We've basically worked with them on everything from launches, such as launching Spotify in the US, or market adjustments, such as IKEA and their concept, getting that concept right in Shanghai, for example, which is relevant in your part of the world. And we actually also developed the world's fastest selling new car brand in China, their first attempt to create a premium car brand. Johan has also been very active in developing H&M strategy in China and so on. So that is, we're quite a small organization, but we have been able to work with quite a few large brands with high impact, I must say, in different parts of the world. And the main reason for why we believe that it has had a great impact throughout these regions and companies is the way that we have helped these companies create the companies and brands, where the key perspective, the key aim has been to actually provide them with a purpose. To provide companies with a purpose is not only a great business idea, it's also something that is more and more expected out of companies these days. And what the purpose really does is that it answers a very simple question. It doesn't necessarily say what the company does, but it says why it does it. And being able to articulate that is the fundamental piece that we help most companies do these days. But I will let Johan elaborate a bit on purpose so that you all know what we mean by that. And from then we look forward to having a discussion and answering questions from the ambassador. Johan.
Thank you, Christian. So what does it mean to be purposeful? I think that there are sometimes a few misconceptions, I think, about what a purpose is about and how you drive purpose in a meaningful way, both for your business and to improve markets. The way, then the starting point and the way that we look at it is really that it is a philosophy on how to drive a business. And the starting point really is that we believe, and I think that there is a lot of proof for the fact, that the winning companies in the future, or the ones that will have a really strong future, will solve real problems for people and real challenges for society. That you need to be associated with improving the everyday for people, and to contribute positively to society at large. Maybe it sounds self-evident in a way that this is something that is increasingly important. But the fact of the matter that there are a lot of complications when it comes to actually driving businesses based on a strong sense of purpose. And I hope to cover some of those aspects today. The 5 pillars of purpose is actually built around trust, vision, future-proofing, responsibility, and innovation. These are the 5 drivers of why people out there actually consider companies and brands to be purposeful. And the way we use to talk about it is a sentence which summarizes it all, which is to have an honest intention to lead positive change. Honest intention to lead positive change. And the word honesty is incredibly important because, as you all know, trust is eroding towards companies and institutions around the world. And honesty and having this honest intention is really the starting point to build that trust, which is a necessary starting point to be a purposeful company and brand. The second part is to have a clear vision of how you want to improve the world. And be able to paint that picture for people so they understand what your company desires to change and improve. The third aspect is to really lead the way, to be a future-proof company, someone that people actually believe will be an influential force in the future to shape markets. Responsibility, of course, is connected to the whole idea of purpose, to actually be a company that contributes to a sustainable development of the world and that actually also acts ethically. So this is a very fundamental element of purpose, even though it's not the only element. Because the last part about innovation, which is incredibly important as well, is the fact that you need to actually prove to the world that you mean for real what you say in your purpose and that you can showcase that with brilliant innovation. So these are the different aspects of purposeful companies, and this is not so much built on our own interpretations and thinking around it, but it's more based on data. These are the 5 foundations on what makes a company perceived to be purposeful, which is increasingly important to be relevant in future markets. I think that's how much that we would like to say as an introduction, and we would be happy to get the conversation started.
Great. It's Niklas here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes.
Wow, I just got, now that you switched out the presentation, I just got this mega big picture of you guys, but which is great. Thank you very much for that introduction. I want to tell everybody on the call that I personally have very attracted by this vision that Lynxeye has had. And in fact, I often use it when I speak to companies here in Singapore. In fact, I brought it up in an opening address I gave to a sustainable reporting summit in an Asia-wide context. And the reason is that I think, like you, that essentially in the long term, it will be, if you want to be a leader, you need to have all these things that are encompassed in an honest intention to lead positive change. I want to ask you some questions and then leave it open for the rest of the audience. And I will get to the obvious one, which is, you know, on everyone's mind now, how the pandemic is affecting what we're talking about. But before that, I just wanted to get into this by asking you, what was it that took you guys to this place to develop this concept? Was it any particular client or brand, or was it more of a sort of evolving idea of what makes companies successful?
I think that for both of us, I know the story, we talked a lot about it. We both worked for Procter & Gamble in the 90s. And it started with the whole philosophy that Procter & Gamble really had, which was really to start to understand the real needs of people and trying to create business concepts and brands around those needs. And as you discovered more and more and how you can contribute to people's lives, and you create that empathy and that bond with people, and you understand that by satisfying those needs better than anyone else, you can see that you really can impact things. You can impact businesses, you can improve people's lives, and you can actually drive positive change to society at large. And when you see the power of that, you sort of get addicted to it, and you want to do it again and again and again and again. And that is actually the reason why we started Lynxeye in 1999.
And how do you, let's say I'm, CEO of a company that makes, I don't know, toasters or soap or something. I understand that, I like this concept. I'm on board with this, and I need to find this purpose, define it for it to be genuine. Otherwise, it won't work, right? Is it a process that you, how do you get there essentially as a company? Is it something that you can work your way towards, develop the company, or is it something that is intrinsic to every business that you just need to find?
I think when we have companies define their purpose, very often what we discover is that there actually was a purpose in the very beginning of their foundation. Very few entrepreneurs have the energy and stamina to take something from nothing to something big without a bigger idea than just making money out of it. And so very often what we do is we discover that there was a specific reason, there was a why to why they started the business. And then what we do is then connect that idea, that why, with what of that is truly relevant to people and society. So very often it is taking that foundation idea, tweaking it and connecting it so that it does matter to people and that it does matter to society. And being that sort of link between that founding idea and people's needs is very often the key to a successful collaboration between us and our clients, and to define a strong, sustainable purpose.
I think that just to build on that a little bit, I mean, the starting point really is, I would say, I used the word empathy before, but I think that empathy is a powerful force, and it's I would say, a concept that is not used as much as it should be in the business world. Because at the end of the day, if you really want to be a meaningful force, if you want to have a strong business in future markets, it will be about understanding those deeper needs that people have and fulfill them better than anyone else, and to foresee and envision some of the problems that we will be facing together, and that would be growing concerns for people in society, and connect your brand and your business to that in a meaningful and trustworthy way. And I think that one of the things that we do, and what actually I think sometimes is quite touching, is like when you connect a leadership team or even a board with their market and with the people that they serve, and they realize these frustrations and the everyday concerns that they have, and when they realize how they can use the resources of the company to overcome those in true ways and develop new business concepts and so forth, you can be actually quite touched sometimes about the reaction that you get when you connect the decision makers and the owners with the market and the people that they serve. So I think the concept of empathy is an important piece of this.
So it sounds like, following on from that, sounds like a big component of that is listening to, your clients, I suppose, the market, your employees, perhaps as well. How much of this is also about attracting, the people you want and keeping them motivated? And because, of course, it seems to me, we talked about this when we were chatting last time, that some of the most successful brands also happen to be the ones where people want to work.
Yeah, definitely. And very often I get the question, is purpose really relevant in an Asian context? Isn't that a Western phenomena that companies can afford the luxury to think through their purpose, work with their purpose, and so on? But just on that point, when you look at the power of having defined a true purpose for your company in terms of what it does to your employees and how they adhere to not only what the company does, but why it does it, it has a tremendous effect. And as Johan was saying, it becomes a bit addictive. And in the context of Asia, the companies that we have had the honor to work with, we see that when you have a purpose, you also get a tremendous effect on employees, on loyalty, on dedication, and even on their ability to work independently and not waiting sort of being ordered to do things. Because with a purpose, you understand what is it that we ultimately are trying to achieve here.
How do you advise your clients on the part of this vision that is the leadership, leading positive change? In your presentation, it's the future-proofing, being a step ahead, and also, of course, that's attractive both from a consumer or client point of view and employee, a company that isn't left behind, that's so around the corner. We'll get to that with the pandemic, but in general terms, how do you advise a company to think ahead? What are the most important concepts in terms of not being left behind?
I think there are a few different pieces of the puzzle. I think that one thing is really, it's like the story around Ford. I mean, people couldn't really imagine that they needed a car, but they wanted to get from point A to point B much faster than they did in the past. So I think it is something that we spend a lot of time on, is really to understand people's concerns and frustrations and try to map out what are the biggest frustrations that, of different reasons, of technological reasons, because it's all of a sudden possible to actually overcome some of these frustrations, or because that there is some other changes in consumer trends and demands, and also maybe changes on a societal level, that you see that some of these frustrations will just become larger and larger and larger. So we look very much at what are the growing frustrations in the marketplace. And then we try to map them as much as possible to different parts of the market landscape. Because one thing is really interesting is to understand that the way we look at the world and the way that we define these frustrations and problems that we want to get resolved from companies is really driven by your values. So depending on what kind of personal values that you have, you tend to look at the world quite differently. And you also have different ideas on what are the kind of problems that you would like solutions for, what are the considerations, what are the concerns for the future, and all of this. So in order to create something that is really future-proof, we try to connect it with deeper motivations of different groups in society. And I mean, we all know, if you look at least in the political landscape in many countries in the world, we see that there is an increasing values divide, that people don't have the same values. So it's becoming increasingly important also to understand those differences in values and see how you can connect with your business with the different parts of society and with the different values that they have. So these are a couple of two instrumental parts of it.
Yes, I will get back to that. But just to now go to the pandemic. We talked about earlier how it seems, at least to me, that a couple of things have crystallized in this pandemic. That people are drawn to brands that seem to be trustworthy, companies that you can rely on in a crisis, companies that had that sort of future vision. How have you, just from your personal perspective, how are you thinking about brands and purposefulness in this time? How has it been affected by the pandemic?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things. First of all, we see very clearly that brands that have been active on a societal level during the pandemic have been recognized for it. People have really been sensitive to what brands and companies have done and how they have sort of responded to this crisis. And that we have seen throughout the world. We do continuously surveys where we look at what kind of companies and brands have been recognized for their purposeful way of running their business. We can clearly see that there's a huge pandemic effect. So, and then you can say, okay, so as things go back to normal, people start revisiting again their needs and aspirations, and everything sort of falls back in place. All of this have been forgotten, and my take on this is it will not have been forgotten. You will see today there is an overall lack of trust in many of the institutions in society generally. People are looking for places to place their trust. So once that trust has been confirmed, once you have seen, I mean, I think Fair Price in Singapore is an excellent example of that, how they have been championing the community. That is not forgotten. That is not something that people will dismiss a year or two from now when everyone is vaccinated. It will be something that the company can continue to build on and put into a relevant context also when the pandemic as such is not as prevalent, but where other issues around community and societal perception are a topic. So I think that those who place themselves rightly and act in a beneficial way today during the pandemic will reap the benefits for a long time to come.
You also see other changes in sentiments during the crisis. You can see a little bit like the crisis that's when people reevaluate their choices. That is fundamentally when they more or less rediscover who am I, what are the choices that I make, what is really important to me. And that we see as well in consumption. And we can see and when we're looking at studies both in Asia, US, and in Europe now, we have our own study, which is called Purposeful Brands, where we're really looking at how people connect with different brands and so forth. We see that brands that are considered meaningful in terms of how they really add value to my life are the ones that are gaining ground, whereas the ones that are maybe a little bit more shallow in their proposition and so forth, and is more talking to the visual side of us, are losing ground. So the more fundamental things, the purposeful brands, the one that really create true value, that solve real problems for people and society, are the brands that gain ground now. And it's very important. Now is an opportunity to connect with that, because that is the sentiment that will be there.
Mm. And we are, of course, now in Asia, and I mean, you're not obviously physically, but your firm is here. You guys have been here a lot. I know Lucian Harrington, who's based here in Singapore, is on the call as well. In terms of where, is there a difference? Of course, Asia is hard to generalize to so many countries and cultures, but from the markets where you're active here, is there a difference in terms of how purposefulness is, I suppose, received, and how deep that thinking is among consumers, among companies, compared to, for example, Sweden?
I think when we talk about Asia, we almost need to make a separation, a generational separation, answering that question. Because what we so clearly see is that if you talk, and now we generalize a lot, of course, and Lucy, please provide perspective if you can. But I would say that you have to divide Asia, Southeast Asia, between the generations that have sort of grown with a wider view of what society looks like around the world, that have been that are active in global dialogues and so on through social media, and the older generations that are still sort of the product of Asia's more or less what should I say, ancient ways of dealing in society and dealing with family values and so on. Because when you look at the new generation, the generation that millennials and so on, you can clearly see how these alignment of values is important to them. Do I recognize this company as a company that is in line with my values? Is that a company I want to interact with? Those are kind of the questions that are being asked by this new generation, but that are frankly not at all on the topic and the agenda for older generations in Asia. So you really need to look at it across that generational divide. But when you look at it, you see that the idea of building companies is equally strong in Asia as it is in Western world. But the topics might differ. If you look at purposeful companies in Asia, they are more focused on providing for their societies and playing a role in the neighborhoods where they are very active. And in that context, other questions than, for example, gender equality, and even to some extent environment are more important. More important in societal context in Asia is how to combat poverty, health, stress-related symptoms. Those kind of things are much more prevalent in Asia than for example, in the West.
Johan, you want to add something on that?
I think, I mean, we are looking at it also the data-driven way overall, and we see that there is it's a growing correlation between considering a brand or a company purposeful and that you are buying that brand and that you're loyal to that brand. So I mean, the short answer to the question is that we can actually showcase that is the case. And it is also, I mean, there are other dynamics to this, which is the fact that the competition is getting more and more fierce, and it's more and more difficult to just differentiate your offering on maybe functional attributes of your product and your service. And so you look for other points of differentiation. And that is what we see, that consumers more and more want to engage with the brand and say, I buy into this brand. I'm not just buying services and products from this brand, but I buy into it. And this brand has, and this company has values that I believe in. And this dynamic is not different at all in Asia compared to in Sweden or in the US. It's the same concept.
I really think it's true that those brands who really show what you're onto with the honest intention, that it's intrinsic to them. They don't just have a CSR person, you know, who is sort of in orbit around, you know, the central business, but that they've made it. It speaks to people. Purpose, of course, can be. I mean, I remember 100 years ago in China when IKEA launched this fantastic advertising campaign showing how their products in the homes of real people, you know, talk about purpose. You can see that's purpose for me. But then we're talking about something bigger now, especially with the younger generation. I thought here in Singapore to take it on to sustainability specifically, because from our point of view, we work as an embassy, of course, to promote sustainability, but it varies in Asia. It varies what sort of parts of Singapore even you are talking to. I thought it was interesting, though, that when an organization like Temasek, Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund, not known to kid around or to fall for sort of fluffy ideas, they have now made it a hard demand on themselves and on their holdings to have certain sustainability goals. That shows that there's been some kind of paradigm shift. How much of when you look at purposefulness today and the drivers behind it, in other words, consumers, can you be a successful brand, an innovative brand, without being sustainable today? How big is the sustainability portion of Purposeful business today?
I think that actually is a little bit, the degree to what is true can differ a little bit between different markets. I would say that it is an important part in all markets that we have worked in, which is quite a lot. The important thing, though, to think about is that you're not thinking about it as if you have the business on one side, you have sustainability on one side, and you have the idea of sort of living up to customers as that is a third thing. But these different things need to be connected. So having a true sense of purpose needs to deliver real benefits to people that improve their everyday lives while you're actually contributing to a better society. And by doing so, you improve the demand for your products and you future-proof them, which is an important element because purposeful brands are considered to be the future-proof brands. They are the beacons for the future. And we all know what that means to how attractive that their products and services will be. And we can just take a very simple example of Tesla that we all know about. And as a matter of fact, I just looked at the data yesterday and I saw that in our study this year, Tesla actually is going to be more meaningful than Apple in our study. That has not been the case. And that is a very easy example where you see that you're actually driving the change towards to actually do something about the climate challenges that we have. It is an electrical car, they're driving that innovation. At the same time, you're giving your customers a really interesting and strong experience at the same time. Given the design value and the premium experience, everything is tied together. You are this concept where you are contributing to make the everyday lives a little bit more delightful, while at the same time actually contributing. And that's quite easy to taste. How these different things don't have to be separate things, but they are interconnected. And I think it's the same thing, like just think about the development of and the demand for ecological food, for instance. I mean, that has been around for quite a while, but when you really see that ecological food really took off as like a really growing part of the whole food market was when people were starting to connect ecological food with quality and also with health benefits, and at the same time contributing to societal development. So when they intersect, that's where you see the real business potential. And that's why I think you need to think about sustainability not as CSR or a separate thing which you do on the side. It's not the way it should work. It should be an integrated part of your business model and your business strategy and your proposition. And that's how you make it work.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. And I think that the Tesla example is a good one. I can say from personal experience, my father of the older generation that is perhaps less prone to think about sustainability, but he can't stop going on about how far ahead Tesla is with technology. And I wouldn't want to be those German big car manufacturers trying to play catch up to this. In the same way that if you're a food manufacturer and you have lots of unhealthy ingredients and you get caught out by people doing the same thing but with more sort of modern appeal, you have to play catch up. That's not the sort of brand you want to be typically, right? I wanted to ask you about specific, you mentioned Tesla, but some of the ones that you have worked with, because I think 2 years ago, Johan, you were here, I listened to you, and you talked about one of your then clients, at least, which was Volvo Cars, and going back to what you talked about earlier about connecting to deeper values and the shifts in values. And you're taking us through this fantastic slide with different types of target consumers for, speaking of car brands. But I wanted to ask both of you, like, whether it's you're probably asking about your specific clients, whether you name them or not, or other companies, but brands or brand stories that you think have really got this concept, something that you want to tell us about. And Anna, I will definitely mute myself between questions here.
Yeah, I think that Christian is the right person to tell you a little bit about the Volvo case. But I'd just like to share another one, which I think is a simple example of how you can find opportunities really in almost any market to be purposeful. Sara Watts with us should have been here and talking about it rather than me, but we are working with a burger chain in Sweden, which is called Max. And they had done, when we came in there, they had done a really good job when it comes to CSR. I mean, they were really leading edge on a lot of these things to impact climate change and also social sustainability. But one of the things that we discovered when working with Max was the fact that typically there was only one person in the household that wanted to go to Max because they wanted to have this lovely burger experience, and whereas there were many in the household that felt that from a health point of view, or maybe even from a sustainability point of view, that didn't feel as fresh, that didn't feel as contemporary. So which means that they more or less, they lost the whole sale, right? Because the family didn't go there. You didn't take your kids to Max, or you didn't take your partner to Max. You went somewhere else. So you had to go to Max alone. So instead we said that what about if we could create, if Max could lead a movement towards more healthy and sustainable food? It would still be a burger chain and providing fantastic burgers, but maybe we would drive the way when it comes to vegetarian burgers and vegetarian alternatives that would taste equally good or maybe even better. And you can bring your whole family, you can bring your partner, and it's okay to go to Max. So that's exactly what they did. So you connected then the idea of sustainability and with health, and still being true to the experience that people wanted when they went to a burger chain. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where if you place a Max next to a McDonald's, about 60 to 65%, if they are beside each other, would go to Max. You can just imagine the business impact of that as you expand the concept. And that's something that was done within a fast food chain. If you can do it there, you can do it anywhere.
Mm. Yeah, the Volvo case and the purposefulness of it, we can talk a lot about it. I just want to put it into a context that I think you Niklas sort of alluded to, which is the huge mandate you get as a company and as a brand when you have a clear purpose. Imagine, let's just take Tesla again. I mean, Tesla is, yes, they are producing cars, but they are producing batteries for homes. They are sending ships to outer space and are preparing for sort of extraterrestrial sort of experiences for people. Imagine Mercedes doing that, or BMW. People would never give them the benefit of the doubt, so to say. Those brands don't have that mandate. And why? Is it because they are of less technological sort of sophistication? No, but they don't have a purpose defined in a way where they have taken on to be a major part in societal evolution in a sustainable way, the way Tesla has. So imagine just if whether or not you believe in the idea of purpose from a business point of view, just think about the enormous mandate you get as a company and as a brand when you have a defined purpose that guides people, that motivates people, and that tells a clear story about how you want to develop society, how you want to provide new and future-proof kind of concepts to people behind one and the same idea. And I think Tesla is a magnificent example. Apple is another one. In a more humble context, I think that what we did with Volvo, which is now 12 years ago, but we're actually still reaping the benefits of that, or at least Volvo is. What that was all about was to redefine what premium cars could actually be like, and what modern mobility could be like. And it was a very big antithesis to traditional luxury car sort of logic. When you looked at what the BMWs, the Mercedes, the Lexus, and so on were all about, it was about the more technology you have in the car, the more the car is sort of prominent in its environment, the more luxurious and the more desirable it is. And what we discovered when we did this global research was that there was quite a large group of people who had the means to buy a premium car, but chose not to. They drove around in their Volkswagens and Toyotas and so on. And when you start asking what, so, you know, with the kind of disposable means you have, why don't you buy a premium car? They said, for two reasons. One is I don't connect value-wise with what premium cars stand for. I always see that, you know, in traffic and in environment, these are the cars that sort of push themselves through, show no empathy. And secondly, as an experience, those cars are filled with technology that are somewhere between irrelevant and almost insulting. Just because I'm not interested in these kind of things doesn't mean that I'm not looking for a premium experience or a high quality experience. Those insights were really the insights that we took with us as we developed the new Volvo strategy, which was addressing a car and a car brand to people who were quite sensitive to the impact they had and the car had to environment, that were very cautious about not putting in technology for the sake of technology, but rather for the sake of actually providing a more human experience to a car. And that was sort of the target for Volvo across the world. So the biggest reason for why Volvo is now almost 70% bigger than it was when we started is that it was targeting an entire section, an entire segment of the world's population that actually didn't even consider buying a premium car 10 years ago. Now, I think that has great value in other contexts as well. But it's not a purpose the size of a Tesla purpose. For that, it requires a founder with strong idea, with the boldness of Musk in terms of taking on and challenging industries in a very fundamental way. But I think he will be the one to show what is possible when you have a very, very purpose-led sort of business and brand.
Great. I'm conscious of time. I have tons of questions, of course, but I'd like to leave the floor open to questions from the participants. Actually, Lisa, I don't know what the best way to do that is.
Yeah, I mean, send through your questions through chat. We have a few here, so I will start with this one. We have mainly been talking now about B2C. How about B2B? How do B2B companies today approach the topic of purposeful branding?
I worked in a lot of different industries, and we love to measure things and try to understand what is really impacting the business. And what sometimes strikes me is the fact that connecting a B2B business with a purpose actually, in many occasions, is more important than in B2C. And I'll tell you why. I can just give you one example, which is within the food industry. And the reason is that it's more and more B2B markets are driven by partnerships, and you work quite closely with a few players that are in an incredible part of an ecosystem for you to provide value to your market. And something that we have seen, and it comes back to what you talked about before when we were talking about the consumer market, is that if you want to be a future-proof company within a B2B market, the values that you signal when you are far ahead on the purpose side is really that you are a partner for the future. You are one step ahead. And for many B2B markets, that is incredibly important. Going back to the food case that I was referring to, we were more or less testing exactly the same associations in the B2B market compared to among consumers. And the positions that were related, or the associations that were related to sustainability, were double the size in importance. Double the size in importance. Because it was referred to or considered that it's a future partner that I want to connect with.
And that is on the external part, but don't forget the huge benefit of having a purpose-led business from an employee perspective. If you want to attract the kind of employees that have high ethical standard, that are looking at their business and the life in a way that is sustainable, those are the kind of employees that make a hell of a difference for a company. And they are attracted as much by a company being able to define why it is doing what it's doing, as much as all the other perks in terms of salary and career promotions and so on. So regardless if you're B2C or B2B, from an employee point of view, in addition to the partner aspect that Johan was alluding to, I think you have a huge potential these times to attract the very best.
When it comes to Sweden, if you take the Asian market, when it comes to Swedish businesses here, are they ahead in this thinking, or are they lagging, or like what is, if you just can focus perhaps on Swedish companies working in Asia on the topic of purposeful branding?
But we often like to think of ourselves and Swedish companies in the context of being far ahead on sustainability and on many of those kind of aspects that provide a strong sense of purpose. But I must say that I've seen also lots of examples in, among others, China, where competitors to traditional Swedish companies are even ahead of Swedish companies when it comes to new environmentally friendly technologies, finding more effective business models. So I think although we have a propensity as Swedes to think quite long term, to think in a way that companies need to take into account employees, human aspect, environmental aspects, we have by no means a monopoly or by no means an advantage, I would say, versus many of the leading companies in Asia. So I think being humble about that is probably the best way to look at your business, even as a Swedish company in Asia. There are several competitors that are impressive in this area today.
On the other hand, looking at it from an opportunity side, I think it is an underutilized opportunity, because there are a lot of positive connotations towards Swedish brand, which are maybe not always there sort of the way that they go to market, they're really able to proof case that. But there is an inherent credibility for Swedish brand within this space, and that is really why I think that in order to enter these markets and expand the business in these markets, it's just an underutilized opportunity, because this will be, the way that I see it, I think that this will be the big thing of the future. I think that the development will go quite fast in terms of how many Asian markets maybe would be even more advanced in this area than many European and US markets. And therefore, the opportunity is huge to take a position.
Are there any markets here in Asia that particularly impressed you, either markets or Asian companies that are really ahead in this thinking?
I work quite a lot with banks and financial institutions in Asia, and I must say that when you look, for example, at a very traditional company such as DBS in Singapore, I think that there is a phenomenal amount of inspiration you can take from such a traditional bank that is showing in a very engaging way how they take on their business and their market from a societal perspective, and how they are interacting with communities, and also being able to convey what they're doing in a way that actually creates credibility and engagingness. Because this is also an area where you have to be aware of the risk of greenwashing things, of superficially trying to look good, and then under the surface you're just as bad as anyone else. But in the case of DBS, I must say that, and I like to use that example because it's a very traditional market. It's a very sort of traditional business model that is being used, but it's a company that definitely has understood the value of showing and acting in their own communities in ways that it feels to be sustainable and empathic, so to say.
I agree with you. DBS is a great case here in Singapore. This is a question to you too. Where, I mean, you've been running now Lynxeye since 1999. Where do you get your inspiration from to always stay ahead creatively?
I think seriously, it's like when we started Lynxeye in 1999, there were good examples of brands that took the initiative to contribute to society in a positive way, but consumers did not reward them to the level that I think that they deserved. But things are changing, and that is what makes this so incredibly inspiring, is the fact that now people are walking the talk. I mean, they are looking for the brands, the companies where they really share the values with, that you really see are contributing positively to people and the world around them. And when you see that enormous power of change, and I mean, change is needed. We are facing huge challenges, economically, socially, and environmentally. And companies are needed there to take the initiative. And as a matter of fact, people out there expect companies to do so. And as a matter of fact, they even think that companies will be better at that than governments. And sort of unleashing that force, securing that companies actually will be this transformational source in society, that keeps me motivated. No problems whatsoever.
Niklas, do you have a last question?
I was reflecting around this thing. Like I, of course, in my job, come across quite a lot of Swedish companies out in Asia. And I think what you're describing there should be something for everybody to think about. We see this a lot. The typical example is something like this. You are profiling yourself to provide a product that is all the good, that is sustainable, that is high quality, and so on. But then you have a competitor, let's say it's from China, that is cheaper, somehow has leapfrogged you in a technology that is sustainable, let's say electric X or something like that, digital Y. In that situation, it strikes me that the brand itself and the genuineness of the brand becomes even more important. Because if you're going to compete with that, most of our companies cannot be the cheapest, but they can have purpose and they can have a strong, reliable reputation and provide products that do the same thing, but in a robust and kind of way that appeals to people, something like that. And on that, since I'm a civil servant after all, can't resist asking you about the Swedish brand, the Sweden brand, because most of the companies in Swedish Chambers, almost all of them are Swedish. I think a couple are Swedish related, something like that. Some, define their brands partially on Swedish identity. Others define Sweden's identity, like IKEA. But most of them have, tried to suck what is good out of the Swedish brand. And I sort of maybe halfway, serious question. We've always been quirky. I mean, Sweden's always been known as that. And I think our COVID, without delving into the whole sort of can of worms of Sweden's COVID policy, but we have received a lot of, attention. And again, it's highlighted if nothing else that, we like to do things our own way. So, but we traditionally, when we discuss at the embassy, what are our values? What do we want Singaporeans to, what's the thing that we're trying to project? We said innovation, we said sustainability, and equality. Those were the three things that we'd like people to know about Sweden here in Singapore. But what do you think about how's brand Sweden doing? And is it an attractive part of purposefulness still for companies?
I think it definitely has been until the 2020. What I would love to see actually is the development through 2020, given some of the associations we've had in the world when it comes to how we're taking on the COVID challenge. So I'm not sure where we stand at the moment, but I think that the research that we've done when in different parts of the world, there are specifically parts of the market, the more progressive end of the market, where really the Swedish brand stands incredibly strong, and there are latent opportunities to build off of those values. And I think that you summarized very well three important assets to build upon. So I think there is opportunity there. And I'm still a little bit interested to understand, what has happened over the last year. But I think there's going back to what I said before about sharing values, and that not all of us think the same way. And it's just looking at, how have the Swedish brand and what we do in Sweden been used by different parts of the political scale in the US. You see, sometimes we tend to do things that one side loves, and then the other day it's the other side that loves it. So I think that the Swedish values are particularly strong in important consumer and customer segments that is more in the progressive end of the marketplace, which tend also to be quite influential part of the market map. So I think there is a lot of latent opportunity there.
But I remember that when we actually launched Lynxeye in Asia, we made a big point out of saying that we work with global brands. We have people from all parts of the world working with us, and we toned down quite a lot the Swedishness. That was a big mistake. If there was one thing I learned very quickly when we established ourselves is that when you think about Sweden as a middle-of-the-road country that doesn't make a lot of noise and is quite uninteresting as being a small country in the corner of one of the least influential parts of the world right now, that was a big mistake. We are exceptional in so many different areas, different and exceptional. There's nothing about Sweden that is normative. We're always on the extremes of all these kind of axes. One thing that worries me a bit though is an association has been very strong with Sweden, and that many brands have sort of built their reputation on, is safety, consideration, and these kinds of values where you immediately got some credibility for your ability to be seen as a brand that is caring. Now, with the COVID situation, and where we again have been on an extreme, it has been in a very un-Swedish way. And that I'm looking forward to see what kind of impact that has had on the Sweden brand as say, given our very sort of different approach to the COVID situation versus other countries.
Thank you very much, both to you, Christian, and Johan, and also to our ambassador for taking time to be with us here today. I'm like thinking ahead here now. I would love to have you in again, maybe next time to work more on a specific case, actually, maybe around the B2B topic. I mean, we have a lot of companies here, obviously, as well, that are not run by Swedes. Swedish companies are not run by Swedes. And my discussion with them is very often that they are, as you say, they're very keen, they want to use the Swedish brand. And it would be really interesting, actually, to get you in, perhaps, and talk more about that. Lynxeye is based here in Singapore, so we have access. They are members of Swedish Chambers. So we hope to hear more from you very soon. And if you want to get in touch with Lynxeye, we'll be happy to connect you as well. But that was everything. That was all for us this afternoon. Thank you very much to all the speakers and to all of you who took time to be with us at Swedish Chambers this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.